Mr. President, as we say goodbye, I have to ask you a question about your book. In your book, you say that you still have a bucket list. What's on it?
I still have a what?
A bucket list, things you want to do. What's on it?
I would like to ride a horse across the Gobi Desert to the place where people think Genghis Khan is buried in Mongolia. I would like to do that. I would like to climb Kilimanjaro before it has no snow because of climate change. That's something I'd really like to do. I would like to go to Namibia, where my daughter and son-in-law went on their honeymoon, and see the oldest desert on earth. The president of Namibia called me once and he said, I came and met with you early in your term and you've never been here. You came to Africa, you went all over the country. Why don't you come here? And I said, because you don't have enough problems, you're too well governed. And I said, you know, an American president, you got to go someplace where there's something you can do. And you don't need us. I'd like to go there and see that desert. Those are some of the things that are on my bucket list.
And finally, one question about the future. The end of a presidency is hard. What would you say to this president about how to maximize that hard time?
Well, first, I think he has already begun to think about what he will do when he leaves office, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, there's nothing sadder than to see anybody who's term limited, like a great athlete, get out of playing whatever you play, and then you can't do what you really love to do anymore, so you just sort of let go. And now that he's only a year older than I was at this stage in his presidency, and he's probably got in 30, 40 years, maybe more left, and I think he should give a lot of thought to that. And I think that he should minimize the chances of being a lame duck, which he can do by continuing to have an agenda and using the budget process to make deals with the Republicans, because now that they have both houses, they have a much greater vested interest in not just being against everything. All they did was do to him for 6 years what they did to me for 4, because they didn't quite complete the circuit of winning the Congress back in 2010, because they ran too many people who were too forthright about their political views for Senate seats. If you remember that, and we had a terrible 2010. Okay, so once you get the budget process, you acquire certain responsibilities. So I hope he can pass immigration reform now, and I think he can. I hope he can pass a tax reform measure and get some of that money back overseas and put it into an infrastructure bank. There are 5 or 6 other things I think he could do. And I hope that his people will keep coming up with new things. We work 6 months out of every year on the State of the Union address. A lot of people here were involved in that. And the whole idea was, I didn't want anybody who worked for me to ever have to get up in the morning and wonder what they were going to do when they got to the office. And I never bought this whole lame duck deal. I just didn't. I just think, you know, it's a mindset. If you just look at Karen's nodding her head, you know, that a lot of them wish I had been a little lamer than I was on hard days. But anyway, I really, that's my only real advice, you know. But it needs to be fun. It's a great honor to go to work in the White House. It's crazy to say you're a lame duck and waste a single day of that precious time. And I was literally, we did stuff up till noon practically of my last day. We were still jetting it out, and I think that's what he should do.
And one on politics, you and Secretary Clinton worked really hard on the midterms. Did you think these Senate races would be closer?
I did, yeah. I did. If you look at the exit polls, you can see what happened. In the South and in West Virginia and Kentucky, let's say the sort of the toughest terrain for us. The exit polls were on point in the 3 least Confederate of the southern states. Like the Florida exit poll said that thanks to a $10 or $11 million expenditure in the last week, an extra one, Governor Scott would beat Governor Chris by a point. He won by less than a point. The exit polls predicted Kay Hagan would lose by 2 points, in spite of the fact that she led in the polls virtually the whole way. The undecided flipped at the end. Apparently some of it was Ebola, which was crazy. It's almost certainly determined the Maine governor's race. The exit polls predicted correctly that Mark Warner would squeak by only a point, even though all the previous polls didn't show that. So they, at least, the model they had for measuring exit polls must have been different than the model they had for taking polls. But in other places, the closest we got to an accurate exit poll was in Georgia, where the exit polls predicted Michelle Nunn would be 1 point behind, and she lost by 8. That's the closest we got. In Kentucky, in Arkansas, in West Virginia, they were, in Nikki Rahal's race, they were 10, 11, 12, 13, in one case 14 points off, because there was a collapse of the youth vote. The African-American vote held fairly steady and was remarkable given the that we had a little bit of a loss of the Hispanic vote, perhaps because the president didn't issue the immigration order, but it was a tough call for him, because had he done so, then a lot of the others would have lost by even more. It was a difficult call. And so what that shows you is that the people who were against us felt more strongly than the people who were for us. And the people who were for us, just in all the din, couldn't hear what was actually a fairly coherent economic message coming out, because when you ask them what they wanted, they said, we wish the Democrats had talked about student loan reform or equal pay or creating jobs through infrastructure projects. And almost 100% of the Democrats that I campaigned with talked about all that, but we didn't have, again, a national advertising campaign that might have made all the difference in a couple of close races. But it would not have changed the larger outcome. I also believed that one of the things that we need to get smart about is how you start your campaign is important, but sometimes the people who would be most influenced by what you say at the beginning don't listen till nearer the end. I'll give you an example. You guys always say, oh gosh, we want all these people to work together and cooperate, and why can't they do things? You know, the poster boy for bipartisan cooperation in the U.S. Senate, except for Mark Pryor, who lost here, but no, they didn't care here. It was a different deal. But it was in Colorado, Senator Udall co-sponsored with Republicans, the bill that created the Simpson-Bowles Budget Commission, the bill that ended earmarks, the bill that gave the president a line-item veto authority again. He was co-sponsored legislation to support a balanced budget amendment, and he co-sponsored the immigration reform bill. And it was all, and he did advertise it in the beginning. And then he was criticized for talking about women's rights. And his opponent, who was rated the 10th most conservative member of the House, was dubbed a moderate because he said he no longer supported the personhood amendment. And yes, he was still on the personhood bill as a sponsor in the House, but everybody knew you had to amend the Constitution, so it didn't really have any, you all shouldn't worry about my name on that bill. And besides, he thought it was okay for women to buy contraceptives. And last time I checked, that's been legal for 40 years. And so their threshold for what constituted a moderate was pretty low. And so here's the guy who did it. And I think the people who really cared about that were the undecided voters at the end. And it might have worked better if whatever he said in the beginning, I never saw the ads or anything, would have been run heavy at the end. There are a lot of things that we need to know that we don't about the difference between people who decide in the last week and people who got their mind made up early. And Colorado's the easiest place in the country to vote. You know, everybody just mails in, or you can bring in your mail-in ballot to the place. And so it wasn't a turnout issue, or there were no voter suppression efforts or any of that. It's just, but I had the feeling all along that he was doing a little better than he was doing. And I think part of what happened is the profile got lost in whatever the news du jour was. And I feel badly because I think he was an exceptional public servant, and so I didn't want him to lose. But anyway, we got to learn about that. And I think the Republicans are also doing that too, because I know enough of them. I've talked to several of them, and a lot of them were surprised by their victory margins. A lot of them won by 4, 5, 6, 8 points more than they thought they did. Some of them who put their own money into the campaign in the last week, once they saw how much they won by, I probably wish they had the money back. But, you know, measuring the psychic landscape of America has always been a challenge, and it will continue to be, and that's probably a good thing.
Mr. President, happy anniversary.